Waiting to go live. Can you hear me? Everybody? Oh, great. Okay, welcome. I don't know how many viewers we have right at this second, but I'm super pleased to be part of this event. And thank you all for getting up so early in the morning, of course. My name's Kathleen Rogers, and I want to welcome you. I am from Earth Day Network with our new name of earthday.org, and we are an organization that works worldwide and year-round. We have about 1 billion people participating from 192 countries. Our focus is on bringing new people into the movement, and we've been a major presence in the worldwide NGO world for about 50 years. And our focus is climate literacy, civic engagement, biodiversity, regenerative ag, plastics, citizen science, and reforestation. Today we'll be hearing from 4 very illustrious women who are all entrepreneurs in their field for different reasons and who've made a huge difference through what I call social entrepreneurship. And by that, I mean individuals, and in the context of the whole prize, groups of people who are innovators and creative thinkers and who lend their many talents to producing results that will better the world. And so I'd love to start today. We're going to learn from this discussion about how business leaders can learn from them, especially young leaders in business who can create parallel and powerful pathways to solve the climate crisis, which is the theme of this year's prize. And it could not come at a more critical time when it seems, unfortunately, the impacts of climate change are outstripping those envisioned, the accomplishments from the Paris Agreement. And so we're very excited for lots of reasons to have you all here today. If you don't mind, I would like you to introduce yourselves for 2 minutes each and talk to the audience about how you became social entrepreneurs in your fields. Can we start with Congresswoman Rojo de la Vega, then Justin, then Alexandria, and Jayathma? There you are. Can you hear us?
Yes. Good morning. Hello, Kathleen. Thank you so much for having me. It is a great honor to share the space with such an amazing group of women who are experts on the field and work every day towards improving our livelihood. I am excited to learn from all of you, as I am a representative of Congress, but more importantly, I'm also a mom, and I worry about the planet we're leaving behind to our children. I also want to thank the organizers, the whole prize, for the invitation, and of course, everyone who decided to join today, for giving us some of your time to talk about such important topics regarding what is happening to our planet and the hard reality of climate change. I will be attempting to express myself in English, but I apologize in advance for any errors and my thick accent. This is the first time I'll be addressing an audience in English, so bear with me. I also invited a friend in case I need some support to get my point across. My name is Alessandra Rojo de la Vega. I have had the honor to serve as a congresswoman in Mexico City for 2 years now. I had a dream that prompted me to become a representative. The dream was to reduce plastic consumption in one of the biggest polluting cities in the world, Mexico City. I began building campaigns to eliminate the use of plastic bags long before I even thought about becoming a congresswoman, since in recent years, single-use and disposable plastics production and consumption has increased up to 900%. We just need to look at the islands of waste forming in our oceans, the enormous amount of garbage on our beaches, and the effect on our wildlife due to the increased pollution of their ecosystems, which is constantly threatening their possible extinction. Therefore, since I stepped into Congress, I have dedicated myself to raising awareness about this huge problem we're facing. I have developed the initiative to ban the delivery, distribution, and sale of single-use plastics. Finally, after a year of hard work, many meetings and resistance from the industry due to their personal interests, we managed to move forward and the initiative was approved. Plastic bags have been banned since the beginning of 2020, By 2021, glasses, plates, cutlery, straws, disposable trays, coffee capsules, and their delivery, sale, and distribution will be banned as well. As expected, there has been a lot of resistance to change. However, the effects of these products on the environment are extremely damaging, as we use them for only a few minutes, but they remain and pollute the planet for more than 400 years. I'm also very passionate about eradicating gender inequalities and protecting women's rights. Actually, my last initiative focused on the environment and its relationship with women issues. The initiative centers on providing the sustainable menstrual cup, though it is important to understand that there is a high number of women who lack access to clean, safe toilets. Therefore, we are adapting to fit those needs. Through my time serving, we have had the support of many important organizations such as Greenpeace, UN representatives in Mexico City, and millions of citizens who have raised their concerns and taken action to create awareness about the immeasurable exploitation of our planet and its natural resources. Personally, I have noticed that national and international dialogues in regards to environmental protection and conservation continue to evolve and be taken more seriously. I believe that women are a key factor in this conversation. Our participation has had a great impact, and many of us are deeply committed to environmental protection. The imminent deterioration of the environment and its natural resources can be countered by committing to daily life sustainable actions so we mitigate and reduce our personal footprint.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Justin?
Hi, Kathleen. Hi, everybody. Wonderful to be here today with all of you, and so early in the morning for those of us on the West Coast or other places. So I'm Justin Winters. I'm the co-founder and executive director of One Earth. We are an organization that was born out of a question, which was, is it possible to solve climate change? And if it is possible to solve climate change, what do we need to do to actually, achieve a world that is sustainable and vibrant and healthy for everybody? So back in 2019, after several years of research, the One Earth climate model came out, and that answered the core question, is it possible for us to solve climate change? And the science behind the One Earth climate model tells us that yes, it is. We can achieve a world of less than 1.5 degrees C if we moved very quickly over the next decade. And there are 3 core actions that we need to take. Those 3 core actions or solutions pathways are transitioning us away from fossil fuels to 100% renewable energy. The second piece is protecting, connecting, and restoring 50% of the world's lands and oceans. And then the third piece is transitioning us away from extractive, polluting agriculture systems to regenerative, climate-friendly agriculture. So we know what we need to do to solve climate change. Really the core question for all of us, including everybody who is a part of this network with the HALT Prize, is really, will we? And the will we question is the question that, that is complex and requires millions of us around the world and really committing to quick action, and specifically action on the ground. So one of our core focuses at One Earth is, I've had the privilege of working in the climate movement and with hundreds of leaders and organizations and communities around the world for over 13 years. And there's a vibrant, deep network of change makers that are on the ground doing this work. And they are doing this, really profound work that involves changing how we relate to the earth and how we relate to each other. And that network, and our specific focus is really scaling up rapid resources, philanthropic resources for the network of organizations on the ground doing that work. That being said, there's all kinds of streams of resources that need to be deployed to solve climate change. Our specific focus is that really catalytic philanthropic capital that can be a game changer for organizations and communities on the ground, and really getting us from a rather sad number of less than 2% of all philanthropic resources go to climate and environment issues to 10xing that dollar amount. And we need to do it really quickly in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's not about any, one of us. It's about a huge network of us that are committed to a new vision of how we live here. So it's an honor to be with all these other women on the call that are committed to moving their sectors, their communities, their networks, and really leading the charge. It's women like these women that give me hope that we can actually, solve the problem. So excited to jump into more of the dialogue. And thanks, Kathleen.
Sure. Thanks, Justin. Alexandria, you're next.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited to be talking alongside all of these inspiring women in this movement and learning from them as well. And so just to briefly talk about my activism and how I got involved. So I'm a 15-year-old climate activist, and I first got involved in the climate movement after joining Greta Thunberg's school strike for climate movement. And I became an international organizer for the global climate strikes after I started striking on December 14th of 2018 in front of the United Nations headquarters in New York City. And so I ended up striking every Friday all the way up until the beginning of the pandemic in March. However, a lot of my activism has turned online, including a lot of other young people's as well. And so after organizing these global climate strikes that we had, though, for the past year, one thing I noticed was that there was a lot of young people who weren't getting involved and coming to strike because they didn't realize why it was important or why they should be. And so that's why I realized how important it is that young people are educated on the climate crisis, and that there was no work going on regarding youth adaptation for the climate crisis. And so that's why I ended up going on to found Earth Uprising, which now has youth-led organizations all over the world. And we're growing really rapidly here in the United States as well. And so we don't have time to wait for our educational institutions to implement comprehensive climate education programs. So we are pushing for that also, but we realize that we have to be the ones firsthand teaching each other, because once young people are educated, then of course they want to take action. And Earth Uprising supports people, young people especially, in taking climate action at the local community level, while also connecting them with national and global campaigns and initiatives. And so while our activism has moved online, we are continuing to grow, and the youth climate movement is growing as well. And so that's just a little bit about what I'm doing, but I'm very excited to hear from the rest of the panel.
And Alexandria, as you know, I've known you since you were, I think, 11 or 12, and really happy to see you always. You've done so much for Earth Day Network and for the movement as generally pretty amazing. And now, Jayathma, you have both been involved in creating NGOs, and now you're a spokesperson for the UN and Youth Envoy. Maybe you can talk about your evolution.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Thank you also for having me in this really exciting panel. My name is Jayathma Wickramanayake, and I'm the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. As Kathleen said, I serve both as a representative of the Secretary General, but also an advisor to the Secretary General on matters pertaining to young people. So in my work, I work across the different pillars of the UN's work, but particularly as relevant to the work that Kathleen mentioned, or the climate portfolio. I've done a couple of things on behalf of the Secretary General, like convening the first Youth Climate Summit at the UN last year, supporting the establishment of a youth advisory group on climate change to the UN Secretary General, and also supporting youth-led innovation for climate action through initiatives like Summer of Solutions or Reboot the Earth. As Kathleen said, I come from a NGO background or youth civil society background. Before becoming the Envoy on Youth, I co-founded a youth organization in my home country, Sri Lanka. It's called #Generation. We worked on the civic engagement of young people in the democracy of our country, but most importantly, coming from a country that was affected by a 30-year-long war and was the second most affected country by climate change at the same time in 2018, I'm really also very much interested in exploring the dynamics between climate change and peace and security, particularly as it affects young people and their futures. So thank you very much for having me again.
Thank you. That was really amazing. I've worked with Hope Prize for quite some time, as I mentioned, and what I see is their interest, and whether they know it or not, in sort of smashing the status quo. And I'm wondering, again, if you can go in the same order. Could you tell me about what you think the impediments are for your success and in your individual programs? And how those interests in maintaining the status quo have hampered your success. If you can just give us maybe a minute and a half each, that would be wonderful to know, especially for our viewers.
Every day is a challenge. Not everything depends on me. Not everything depends on me. In Congress, to push legislation, there needs to be a consensus, and not everything depends on me, which is frustrating. As it is enough wanting to do things, but make them happen.
Yeah, I can imagine you face, especially with plastics, because we also work on plastics, especially in the ocean, extraordinary resistance to that. So we'll get back to that in a second. Justin?
I mentioned this earlier, but I think one of the biggest impediments to the climate and environment space is the lack of philanthropic investment in it. It will never fail to amaze me how, we give so much more to other sectors, whether it's health, the arts, and it's not that those things aren't important, but the fact that, planet Earth and how we kind of interact with it and creating a sustainable future, that gets such a low level of a philanthropic investment, while it arguably needs the most, has always astounded me. And I think that part of the reason is because climate environment is such a complex issue. It's really hard to kind of understand how to best direct resources to solve problems that really require writ large global change.
Right.
But I think we're at a moment right now, and this kind of astounded me. I just found out and read a report last week that the world's wealthiest, got even wealthier during the coronavirus pandemic. So there's roughly 2,200 people that are of billionaire status who made 10 trillion additional dollars. And so this is kind of a moment where we need folks with resources to really commit to climate and to environment, and to getting those resources, not just to large institutions that typically have received resources, but to the very vibrant group of grassroots organizations around the world that are doing this work. So to me, it's a myriad of obstacles that we've faced. Everything from the complexity of climate environment to the complexity of understanding how you do funding to grassroots and community-led organizations. And then, a lack of willingness to be kind of creative and innovative in how you try to address systemic issues that are, deeply embedded in how we solve climate and environment issues.
Yeah, thank you. That's right. I especially believe that investing in community groups. Earth Day is a network by definition, and we are nominators for dozens of prizes, and because we know the ground. But I absolutely believe you're correct that there are amazing, noteworthy, innovative, groundbreaking efforts going on in the ground, and those smaller groups really do deserve funding because they both know the local situation and can act on it in a way that big, gigantic corporate interests in the environment, the big organizations, can't really do. They do wonderful work, but a lot more needs to be done on the ground. Let's see, Alexandria, you're next. What are the impediments to your success besides funding, or you can talk about that too, especially breaking the status quo?
Definitely. I think that, it's exceptionally difficult for really young people to build organizations, like many of the youth who are leading Earth Uprising. Because of our age, we're seen as flaky and irresponsible sometimes, and we're often passed over for acknowledgement and funding, of course. And we have to really fight to be given a seat at the table with government leaders and decision makers. However, we're also quite tokenized as well because of our age. Sometimes we're in these rooms just to be a young person and to seem as if they're engaging us. And so, youth will find ourselves in spaces sometimes where we're really not listened to. And so the first problem is that the status quo and the culture of youth gets in our way. And we're also an intersectional organization. And many of the youth leading Earth Uprising groups around the world are of color, and they come from marginalized and minoritized communities. So we often see the effects of climate change and racism in our organization because of many of our youth leaders experience racism personally. And so not only do we have to push back against the way youth are often viewed when it comes to leading our own organizations, but we're also doing the work of anti-racism, which is absolutely part of the climate crisis too, because we cannot get climate justice without racial justice.
Thank you. Jayathma?
Yes, I fully subscribe to all the challenges, unfortunately, that my fellow panelists have shared, and it has certainly affected my work as well. Three things particularly that has become very visible to me in my work is one, is always seeing young people as more or less adults in training, without recognizing their full leadership and agency. As Alexandria said, we have to really fight to get our seat at the table, but also when it comes to really recognizing the important contributions that youth-led organizations have done in communities, that usually doesn't happen either. So for an example, we know that more than 90% of the youth organizations are voluntary informal networks of young people coming together to solve problems in their communities. And these groups are often unable to tap into funding from big donors and from big institutions, and do not often check all the boxes in terms of registration and numbers of years of experience, which really prevents them from accessing the resources and the tools that they need. So this unfair power dynamics between policymakers and youth groups, between institutions, donors and youth groups, are really hampering progress when it comes to scaling up the youth-led solutions that we already see working really so well, as you said, Kathleen, on the ground. Secondly, another challenge is seeing young people as the future. You might see a lot of references to young people as the leaders of the future, in some ways putting young people's recommendations and advices and their demands as if something that could be solved in the future, not now. So we see a lot of laws, regulations, policies being passed in governments through corporate sector without really taking into that future generations factor into account. So this is really affecting the impacts of the decisions that we are making today onto the lives of the young people and future generations in the future. Thirdly, another impediment really is that we think when we say young people, that every young person is the same or that it's a homogeneous group. Alexandria spoke about the racial injustices, the minority groups who are experiencing this crisis in different dimensions and at different levels. But also, not in every country it is safe for young people to do their activism. In certain countries, protesting is illegal. In certain countries, finding your own NGO or working on your civil society group is illegal. And we've seen how young people are being arrested, how they are being subjected to retaliation by state and non-state actors, both governments and private sector, really also putting young people's safety in danger. So I think the protection of young activists, as much as we encourage them to speak up and do work in the communities, is as important if we are to challenge the status quo and really highlight youth leadership and youth-led solutions.
Thank you. I'm going to go out of order a little bit in the questions that I had, we talked about having a discussion. And that is, I feel recently, particularly in the US, we just got through our elections, but it's happening around the world, that social media, which was viewed as this disruptor and opportunity to communicate big ideas and to build movements around them, is kind of degenerated into something that many, many people, if not the majority of people now, distrust. And I'm wondering for each of you, and we can go in reverse. Why don't we go in reverse order this time? So starting with Jayathma, how you feel social media can drive changes in the status quo. I can tell you in our own organization, well, we could put out a post and it could get thousands of likes. Moving it from a like to engagement to signing a petition to donating, whatever it would be, is an incredibly difficult pathway. And so, but there is that need to communicate with people new ideas. So I'm wondering how you see social media impacting your work and those you fund or in the government, and particularly with the amount of disinformation that we're seeing, and then the possible breakup, at least in the US, but maybe Europe too, of the big giants. And then there's a counterpart to that discussion around climate change I'll get to in a second, but let's start with that. Jayathma, do you want to start and talk about how that impacts your work?
Yes, no, definitely. I think, first of all, I think social media is a really great tool if used positively and if used properly. And it always comes with that caution, which I'll get to in a little bit. You asked to bring my story of evolution, Kathleen, and I started this youth organization I mentioned, #Generation, back home with my friends a couple of years ago. And we were looking for different ways to establish ourselves, to receive funding, to talk to different groups. But we found ourselves in a position where because we were young people and because we were so informally and loosely organized, we couldn't really tap into some of those platforms that institutions had. So the only free tool that we had was social media. So our organization actually started on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter, because that was the only free platform that we had to get our voices out. And then through that legitimacy we built on social media, we went on to register our organization and kind of formalize and then be able to apply to funding and make networks and bring in more partners and keep amplifying our work. And I know so many youth organizations and youth activists who really followed that model or who really used and capitalized on the outreach that we have on social media to get their voices out there. And I think as a generation, particularly millennials and Gen Z, who are living on the internet from the day they are born to their grave, we cannot really disregard the importance of technology and of social media on our lives in the way we think about consumption, the way that we produce, or the way that we live our lives, basically. So it's very important to use social media as a tool to spread out these messages. But as you very correctly said, we need to establish that link between our online and offline lives in order to bring that transformational, sustainable change. And in terms of the caution that I mentioned earlier, I think even though this is a great tool, most of the time freely available, if you live in a place where you have access to technology and access to internet, we're still seeing issues when it comes to privacy. We see a lot of bullying and harassment and surveillance on activists online using these same platforms that you mentioned. And in recent times, some of these platforms have really posed a great threat to our democracies, to our elections, and to the way that our formal political systems are set up, because they're not really taken into account these new developments that we've had, particularly on social media and technological platforms. So I would say it's a double-edged sword, and it's really up to us to make sure that these big companies are held accountable, but also on the other side to empower and to educate young people so they can use these tools in the most positive way possible.
Great. Alexandria, I know you've been on both sides of that coin of the benefits and downsides of social media. How do you see it playing out in the next few years and building a bigger, better movement?
Yeah, you know, in the youth climate movement, of course, we use social media a lot. And I think how we do it is by flooding the different platforms with youth-led social media accounts. So, for example, We have a social accounts for every single local Earth Uprising group, and this gives us an advantage because with so many accounts, we have a larger reach to advertise our activities and recruit other youth to join us as well. And so with all the local groups, local organizers see it, and it's a great way to get more people engaged and recruit young people. And I think another advantage to having so many related social media accounts is that it gives us a larger platform to counter that disinformation. Also, since there are so many accounts are for local communities, we're countering disinformation at the local level as well, which is often right where it begins. We saw a lot of misinformation as well in places like Florida during the election, and we had large Earth Uprising groups in those communities. And so with our accounts, we make sure that we counter all of that disinformation that's put out there. And we do also counter trolls and climate deniers, of course, and people who try and attack us. But that's what the block button is for. And in youth activism, we have started to stress that even more if there are people who try and get in there and change the narrative from what it really is. And so I definitely agree with Greta in that we don't have time to even deal with or respond to climate deniers or trolls through the internet.
Thank you. Let's see, who's next? Alexandra? There you are.
I'm absolutely convinced that social networks have taken on special relevance as a tool for change. As Yaya mentioned, when we raised our voices together as a community and make use of this tool positively, we're able to request action in regards to the causes that matter the most to us and to our followers. Personally, for me, social networks have become the direct means of communication for people who require my participation to achieve joint significant results. In my country, we have built it out as a support network against violence and in favor of safety. We demand attention from our leaders and representatives, such as myself, who are able to take meaningful action to the government level. Social media has allowed me to be in direct contact with my constituency and build trust as their representative, which has provided me with credibility and a lot of civil society support to push for significant legislations. We are entrepreneur. I am entrepreneur. I recognize that with social networks, we have the opportunity to be close to those who pursue the same objectives, creating communities committed to promoting what is right, as well as environmentally responsible business alternatives, products, and services.
Great. And Justin, do you feel the same way? Are you seeing anything evolve or an evolution that might support you or hurt you? Or and this is really the question in terms of building a broader environmental movement as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been part of that journey, kind of watching how digital and social media can help grow and support the movement for over a decade. And having done that initially at the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, our focus was really utilizing those channels to broaden the network of people around the world who understood that climate and environment were an issue and were inspired and excited to engage. So at this point, some 10 years later, social media and digital media, it is a tool that's baked into how we operate. You literally can't have a strategy without thinking about social media. I guess I wanted to respond specifically to something Alexandria said, which I think is important. She mentioned, kind of bypassing directly, going against climate deniers and others that are kind of showcasing a different narrative that climate's not an issue or it's not caused by people. I think it's important for the environmental movement to basically in some ways kind of ignore that and carry on and start really broadcasting through the social media channels and networks both the solutions pathways and a vision of the future that we want to build. We have an opportunity to really mobilize millions of people around the world into the future that we all collectively need to build. And that can happen really effectively through social media, because you have an opportunity to create a narrative that is exciting and inspiring. And probably our biggest challenge going forward will be, how do you knit the social media world network and tools to local action on the ground, and how do you take that offline and have it inspire and mobilize and add value to really engagement at the community level. So I don't know what the answer to that is exactly, but I think it's an important kind of piece. And obviously, especially during the pandemic, we couldn't even begin to carry on with doing our work without social media and digital tools. But really, it's about how we can start to really use it to get even more people mobilized, and then how do we use it to inspire tangible action at the local level.
Yeah, and I think that's the real question, is how you move it from communication to action. And I think we'll go back to maybe that at the very end, because we have so young, incredibly smart entrepreneurs who have worked together sometimes for even more than a year or two, putting together some of their amazing ideas. We've had, and some of them on here are invented bamboo bikes and solutions for biodegradable plastic and air conditioners that are highly efficient, that can be distributed to the poor in a very economical way. So the question really is, well, none of us are business leaders. In a way, we all have to manage our own business, and so could we discuss how, both from the not-for-profit perspective and government perspective, how we view industry across the board? And do you think business entrepreneurs like our listeners will get the funding? Should they get the funding? How should that work? As you all know, in the Industrial Revolution, most of the greatest technologies that were invented were done out of people's garages, and that's a fact. And then eventually they sold them to big business. So how do we engender that? What's the role between the not-for-profit world and government world to assist them? And how do you view the long-term outcome for business playing a role in solving climate change? Let's start this time with Justin.
It's a great question. We don't solve climate change without the business sector committing to and being supported in kind of this transition. And the role of entrepreneurs and business leaders who are either solving for really interesting, innovative technologies that can help us leapfrog the solutions on the ground and get them implemented. We don't get there without that. It's really a critical piece of this. From my perspective, I think really it's one of the things that's always overlooked, is that we've overly focused on kind of big top-down tech solutions, when really what it's going to take right now, and what we know it's going to take, is action on the ground. And that's communities transitioning to 100% renewable energy and fighting off fossil fuel interests. That is communities being empowered to protect and defend nature, or to restore nature. And in many cases, that's their lands and their waters. And it's also about communities and farmers and ranchers being supported in the transition to regenerative and climate-friendly agriculture. And the thousands of solutions across those three pillars that will help communities make those transition. That's an incredibly vibrant, exciting space for entrepreneurs to really put their minds, their resources, their talents to. And there's no doubt, we have a ton of examples across the Holt Foundation Prize and people that are part of this network of really interesting, innovative tools that are helping scale up all of those solutions writ large. So we don't get there without the involvement of entrepreneurship. And you can be an entrepreneur whether you're in business or philanthropy or in government. It's about being creative. It's about really looking for answers and using all the resources at your disposal to get you those answers. And it's about working collectively and collaboratively, which, isn't a term that's used necessarily in business, but it ought to be. And it's the way of the future. So, excited to see what youth entrepreneurs kind of bring to the space, are bringing to the space, and seeing how we can scale up the tools and the technologies and the businesses that they bring to bear.
Thank you. So tell us about Mexico and entrepreneurs. By the way, the last time I was a judge, which was our last in-person event, a team from young people from Mexico won a sustainable tourism prize. They won the top prize. And we had a couple of other, at least 2 or 3 other incredible teams from Mexico that came up with either products or services that were pretty astounding. And while they didn't win the prize, Mexico certainly was in the vanguard on a couple of areas. So tell us in Congress, from your personal experience, how Mexico is doing and what you think the role of entrepreneurs might be in solving some of the crises that you're facing.
That's great to hear, Kathleen. I really believe that companies and the business sector are definitely part of the climate crisis that we are experiencing today. They are part of the problem, but at the same time, they can also be part of the solution. Just like people, companies must change their way of reacting to the effects of climate change, and we should all carry out best practices to protect the environment. I am an entrepreneur, and every day I made a conscious effort to set an example of what can be done to improve our planet. In my experience, for example, there is no single-use plastic integrated into my business production chain. And above all, I have focused on building awareness campaigns to convey that the economy and the environment are not necessarily enemies. It is possible to protect the economy and the environment simultaneously through innovation and changing the culture. A few days ago, the United Nations, through their environmental program, reported that global companies have made significant progress in incorporating recycled content in their plastic packaging and moving towards its gradual elimination. Companies are returning to the use of reusable and recyclable packaging, among others. And they are also increasingly using cleaner energy in their production processes, proving that if more companies join this transition, the positive impact to our planet will be greater. We need to use all resources and work together to achieve change and scale up.
Thank you. Alexandria?
I definitely do think that we need entrepreneurship to address the climate crisis. Actually, just this week, there's a new scientific research that shows how even when we reduce our emissions to nearly zero, we'll still have to remove additional carbon dioxide from our atmosphere in order to continue to protect and heal the planet. And so one of the things we need entrepreneurs for is to come up with new carbon capture processes and technologies. See, our world needs to become a carbon sink, whether it's through soil regeneration or through other technological solutions that haven't even been invented yet. In Earth Uprising, we've just started having these conversations, and entrepreneurship and being the generation that leads in climate entrepreneurship. And we're building a support structure for youth who want to move from activism in Earth Uprising to founding their own organizations and businesses as adults. So we're calling it Earth Uprising Alumni because we recognize we won't be youth forever, and we need to transition the youth activists of today to the government and the business leaders of tomorrow.
Thank you. And by the way, Earth Day Network's theme for 2021, which, well, it's amazing that 500 million to 1 billion people adopted as their theme for the year, is climate restoration, and is that combination of using the world's natural systems like reforestation and ecosystem restoration, as well as a big hot topic, of course, we've all flagged, which is regenerative agriculture. But we're also looking at a lot of technologies, and so many of them have improved since that concept of the giant vacuum cleaner in the sky that would suck it all out. So we're seeing really smart technologies come down the road, and we're hoping that some of them will get financed. And once they're tested, they'll be very valuable. And I don't know, Jayathma, what's going on at the UN in terms of how the Youth Envoy in your office is interacting with business? And do you see business playing a major role in that UN process? And also from an entrepreneur's perspective, are you seeing a lot of that at the UN level?
Yes, definitely, Kathleen. And I think the Global Compact, one of the speakers mentioned before, has really doing a fantastic job in rallying the support through the business sector for the 1.5 campaign, 1.5 degree campaign that they did. But I think a lot of the things I wanted to say were already mentioned by my fellow speakers. But I just wanted to highlight also, we tend to sometimes, particularly politicians, put the responsibility of solving the climate crisis on young people. Either it's young activists or young entrepreneurs or young people in general. One of the things that really struck me the more and more that I started learning about the climate crisis is that actually 100 companies are responsible for more than 70% of the global emissions that we are seeing today. So the role of the private sector when it comes to mitigating the climate crisis is absolutely crucial. And this has to happen through integrating sustainability models and greener models into the core business model, which is something that we are not seeing at the scale or the speed that is required. We see a lot of private sector and companies doing small CSR projects almost to support, certain communities or certain small projects. But what we really need is for the private sector to integrate sustainability practices into their core business models and change the way of they are doing business in order to bring that transformational large scale change we need to do in order to tackle with those 70% of the emissions that I was talking about. And secondly, I see a huge opportunity here. We live in a world that is younger than ever before. One of the reasons why my job exists is because our world has a huge population of young people. Half of the world's population is under 30. And by 2030, we need to make 600 million new jobs to accommodate this large youth population into the labor market. So there is a need for the creation of new jobs. And this is the opportunity that I think the private sector really need to capitalize on to create greener jobs, to create new dignified jobs in the renewable energy sectors, in this transformation, in this economic transformation, so that they take care of our planet and our climate, but also they economically empower the next generations of young people.
Yeah, and I agree with that to a certain extent. I think I'm incredibly optimistic, and I think everybody on this panel, we were all born optimistic. So I might sound like I'm a little pessimistic or the glass is only half full, but I do feel, and it's not just because I'm listening, because we're part of the whole prize, but I do find corporations generally, and I work with them all the time, it is really hard for them to switch gears and to get the shareholders and their boards and everybody to go along with something that's disruptive. Whereas social entrepreneurs, they're young enough, or in many cases, willing to take the risk to change things. And so that's certainly my shout out to Holt Prize for everyone, because I do think that many major corporations, certainly in the traditional industries, are dragging their feet, and they've been dragging their feet forever, and they intend to drag their feet because that gives them more time to switch out into something better. And that's why I have so much faith in entrepreneurs being able to solve some of the problems. I also think, and my next question wasn't quite in what we all talked about, but I'd like to talk about climate and environmental education and civic education just briefly from all of your perspectives. Because while Alexandria is right, we don't have time to educate a new generation that may be 4 years old right now. There's so much of a crisis going on. I would love your thoughts on how we can convince governments and corporations that we need to teach civics. We need to make every child climate literate and give them those skills, because so much of what's going to happen with respect to climate is going to happen at the local level, and it's going to happen to vulnerable communities. And if they're not educated, they can't get the jobs, they can't participate in government, they can't request information, and they can't get involved in civics. So I'm wondering how you feel in your own lives about the role of really pushing forward for climate and environmental literacy worldwide, and also the role of civic education and teaching people how they can control the outcomes for themselves better. So maybe we could start with Jayathma this time again.
Yes, this is a topic that I think is really, as you said, Kathleen, more or less not getting enough attention, the climate education piece. And a lot of the times I feel that we forget that the Paris Agreement actually calls for climate education. Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is about action for climate empowerment, which encourages governments to draw up plans to inculcate climate education in their national curriculums. I have seen recently that Italy made an announcement that they will make climate education mandatory in their schools, but still Italy is just one of the 193 countries, at least in the UN membership, and there's so much that needs to be done. And I agree with Alexandria that we cannot really wait for this change to happen slowly. So this is where we need the youth organizations to step up, keep talking to their peers, utilize social media as we discussed earlier, and really translate this information also into multiple languages that young people can understand. One of the youth advisors of the Secretary General on Climate Change, Sofia Chiani, she works on translating climate information into various languages so that it's accessible to young people, so that it's not only in English, so that it's not only in French, but every young person everywhere can have access to that information. So when we talk about entrepreneurship and innovation and the spirit of entrepreneurship being filling gaps or finding solutions to big problems that our world is facing, I really see an opportunity there as well to innovate solutions to increase climate education and climate literacy among young people.
Thank you. Alexandria? I know you're involved and I know you're interested. And for the audience and everywhere else, there is going to be, I hope, at the next convention of the parties and in Milan, there will be what we hope will be a consensus document signed as part of ACE, the Action for Climate Empowerment, that will require climate and environmental literacy as well as civic engagement. And actually, Italy is teaching their climate and environmental literacy out of their civics department. And Mexico, by the way, is also very involved in this and has agreed to go along with this document. So, but Alexandria, tell us how you feel. Maybe you just want to mirror Jayathma's words, but I know you've been involved.
Yeah, I'm actually on the Civil Society and Youth Advisory Board for COP26, which is where the homework for the Paris Agreement is due, is this upcoming COP. And so we are planning for a huge youth presence at COP26. And I was at the last COP in Madrid, and there's such a lack of representation of young people and actual actions that came out of it. And so this COP is going to be we're going to push even harder than we did before. And so pushing for education at the global level, especially civic education, and also, like I said before, youth climate adaptation is going to be one of our top issues at COP. Because one thing I believe with climate education is if we're not taught about our future, it's almost like a betrayal, because we're being educated about how to grow up in this consumer world and capitalism, that in the future we're going to have to change. And so we're basically being taught lies about our future, and we need to be taught the right education. And so that's what we're going to be pushing for.
Great. Alessandra?
Thank you. There are many companies that refuse to evolve and that weigh economic interests above human health, lost sight of the close relationship between our actions in favor of the environment and our health. I trust that every day there will be more of us who want change and to move towards the development of sustainable practices that open up millions of opportunities to transform businesses, to continue building economic growth, but mainly bringing environmental benefits to our planet. However, to achieve this transition, we need new generation to become climate literate. I presented just a few months ago an initiative about environmental education for all public schools around the country to incorporate the subject as a required part of the course. Children these days are more conscious. Me, as a mom, I do activities with my kids from picking up trash on the streets to recycling at home. I am noticed my kids become more and more aware about its importance. Our youth is the future and the ones that will be able to solve the climate crisis.
Thanks. Justin?
Just to add, and back to the climate education piece, there's climate education is also talking about education and understanding of Earth systems and how humans live on the planet and how how nature is providing our clean air, our healthy soil, our healthy food. There's a real lack of understanding writ large of how we are able to live on this planet. And the incredible services that the planet provides to us. So one of the things that I think is critical is in this transformation that needs to happen, and a big piece of this is education, is reconnecting youth and young people. And I have a 5-year-old, so I can very much relate to this, but reconnecting them to the earth and to the very systems that sustain life, and a general understanding of how those systems support all of life, how biodiversity benefits humans, how the soil works and how the soil grows food and how it can suck carbon down into the ground. These are all fascinating topics that get very little in our educational systems and in general writ large for the public and across social media. And so that is going to require a big kind of transformation in how we understand, how we teach our kids, and how we reconnect to ways that we need to be living on the planet to sustain and build a healthy future. So that it's actually a big barrier to overcome. But it's also really exciting to think about how we could be redesigning our education systems and redesigning how we learn, what the education process is like, and the topics that we cover. To me, it's one piece of this massive redesign of how we live here on the planet that we need to be embarking on. And it's actually an exciting opportunity, and one that we all, we can all be part of it, whether we're part of philanthropy, NGOs, the youth movement, entrepreneurs, big business. It takes all of us to be part of that real nitty-gritty, but also transformative process of shifting how we live here.
Yeah, I think all of you hit incredibly important points. I know we're really pushing this in civics because we did a World Bank study, and unfortunately not a single country had climate and environmental literacy that any of us would be call adequate, and none of them taught civics or how a community could respond to an environmental crisis. They just don't have the skills. So it's really interesting, all of these different perspectives. And I think climate and environmental literacy also can create, green job ready workforce. It can create green consumers, which brings us back. I don't think we have much time. We don't have much time. So bringing us back to business, I wonder if each of you, because we have a great audience of entrepreneurs, a lot of people, and they're hanging on to your every word. So I'm wondering if you can maybe just finish up with maybe 1 minute each about how you would encourage all of your listeners to pursue their social entrepreneurship and business entrepreneurship. And they're all ears. So maybe try again, start with Justin this time, your final comments.
Yeah. First of all, it's this, like, as I was saying before, this next 5 to 10 years is it. We actually have a very tight window. We cannot afford to lose any more of our natural lands to deforestation and destruction. We can't afford to continue to pollute and extract. This is our moment to shift into new ways of living on the planet. And we need entrepreneurs who potentially in the past have been focused on engaging ways that they can build a new business and make a big profit, to instead be thinking about how can they contribute to that transformation that needs to happen. How can a business fill a critical gap to help us make this transition and this transformation much faster? So I would challenge this network to join us in that. I know many of you are already doing that, but as I've said before, this is about the collective taking swift transformative action. So we need all of you to put your creativity, to put your resources, to put your mind share into solving those key gaps, filling those big opportunities to help us scale solutions in our communities and globally. And I know that sounds very broad, but there's a myriad of solutions across the planet that we need to do for both transitioning our energy system, transitioning how we protect and restore nature, and transitioning our agriculture systems. And that is a huge opportunity. So I'll just throw out the challenge that everybody listening today can commit to not only wanting to build a successful business, but building a business that is part of us really scaling up solutions and helping the transformation happen that needs to happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
And by the way, maybe we can convince the whole prize to do regenerative ag next year is the prize. Well, I'll see what I can do. Alexandra, by the way, your English was absolutely perfect.
Thank you so much. I'm doing what I can, so I hope it's good. It is up to you as agents of change to define the path towards the adoption of best practices. My thanks and support to all those who decide to undertake with conviction, thinking a change, always prioritizing and thinking about our future and our planet. Thinking about building businesses or companies that support the protection of the environment is the way to guarantee our subsistence. We need to put our mind into solving our climate crisis. I'm proud and excited to hear about these classes, creativity and innovation. As Kathleen mentioned, we have amazing young climate champions in Mexico and all over the world, which gives me hope and makes me very, very proud. Young people have the possibility of reversing the effects of climate change. Let us not waste this opportunity and continue to show that we are the generation that will save our planet.
Thank you. Okay, Jayathma, you get to close.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. I also wanted to just say I misspoke earlier. I said Article 6 of the Paris Agreement talks about climate education, but it's actually Article 12 of the Paris Agreement and Article 6 of the convention. My team just let me know, and sorry about that. But the key message remains the same. We need climate education. My message to the young entrepreneurs really is, be bold, be ambitious, do not wait for an invitation, keep innovating, keep finding solutions. With Hall's Prize, you have an amazing opportunity there where you not only have access to this funding, but you will also receive mentorship and guidance. And I've seen this discrepancy where sometimes funding is there, but there's nobody to walk young people through these solutions and support them, mentor them, and guide them. Or sometimes the mentorship and guidance is there, but there's not enough finance. So here there is a perfect combination of both those factors, but also a great platform where you can connect with experts and your peers and find common solutions. So please make full use of this opportunity and this platform. And I really look forward to seeing some bold, groundbreaking solutions from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. I thought this was a great collection of fabulous women that are working so hard to change the world. And it wasn't even intentional. It just worked out that way. And it's rare in my experience. When I first started doing this, I would go to a conference and I would be one woman with 1,200 men. And if I were dating, that would have been awesome, but I was married. So it was kind of lonely. So I'm glad to see there's been a great evolution over time and so many great women involved in this. So thank you very much, all of you. And of course, we'll be doing follow-up, and I'm sure the whole prize is grateful too. So thanks very much. And I'm hopeful I'll see you all again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for the space.
Yeah.